Okay, so let's turn to interventionist policies. So the first interventionist policy that we discussed is ISI, and ISI stands for Import Substituting Industrialization. There's substituting, what's T there? Industrialization. So this was based on the ideas of some Latin American economists, Prebisch and Singer. And they had a variety of worries. I mean, obviously their names will remind some of you of the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis. And what they were worried about was they were kind of worried really about the imbalances in global trade. And what they said is that there is a big risk, that because Latin America, when they were writing, which kind of 50s and 60s, 40s, because Latin America was still not fully industrialized, what they said is there is a kind of imbalance in the relationship between if they try and trade with the US and European countries, they're always going to end up being forced into their area of comparative advantage, which is primary products. And primary products have low value added, and what's worse, is that it's likely that over time, particularly agriculture, prices are going to get driven down, whereas prices, the price of things requiring high levels of skills and innovation and so on, their prices are going to rise relative to those of primary products. And they said this is therefore going to be a disaster. We're going to live in perpetual poverty, being cornered into producing primary products, while rich developed countries go on and develop, kind of cars and computers and so on and so forth. So they said the only way around this is if we can create vertical linkages. In other words, it's like vertical integration from theory of the firm. If we can take our primary products and then base industries on that. So we use the primary products to produce something manufactured. We then use that to make something more sophisticated and so on. And what Prebisch and Singer and the whole lot of them, but Prebisch particularly, what he was saying was that the only way you're going to be able to do that is therefore if you cut yourself off from Western competition. They're already got economies of scale. They're already huge. Therefore, what you've got to do is to replace imports with your own with domestic production, and that way you will industrialize. So it's essentially the infant industries argument, and you can imagine that the central part of it is fairly obvious, which is we put big tariffs on we put tariffs and other tariffs and quotas and other forms of restrictions on imported products to make them uncompetitive in the global marketplace. But they also said, well, if we're going to industrialize, we're also going to need to get those industries started. So therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make sure we have state control. So it's the reverse of the free market model. We're going to nationalize key sectors, to allow them to offer low prices, to industries that are developing. We're going to give subsidies, to allow sectors to get started. And in many cases, what we're going to do is we're going to overvalue the exchange rate. We're going to overvalue the exchange rate. We make sure that imports can't come in. So although a high exchange rate makes imports cheap, we just make sure there's like a 500% tariff on them. And the overvalued exchange rate then allows technology and capital to be imported. Some countries experimented with kind of one exchange rate for certain types of things and a different one for other ones, But that's the basic idea. So what we do is we keep the exchange rate high to allow us to import technology and capital. We have state subsidies, state-controlled, nationalised sectors, subsidies to build, things like infrastructure, that type of stuff, and to support these infant industries, and we have high levels of tariffs on imports, so that they can't, so that local firms can grow and generate economies of scale. So, in terms of when you look at how successful that was, it was pretty successful in its early days. So you look at Brazil. Brazil from the period something like 1945 to the kind of 70s sometime. It was growing by 7% a year, and the policies meant that instead of producing low value added stuff, what they did is they developed high value added sectors like cars, consumer electronics, and those sorts of things. And therefore, it kind of changed the DNA of the Brazilian economy. it worked better for Brazil than it did for a lot of other Latin American countries, because the obvious point about import substituting is that you have to, you're going to be constrained by your domestic market. Yeah, the high exchange rate means you're not going to be able to export, and in any case, other countries are going to retaliate. So you're constrained by the size of your domestic market, which is fine for Brazil and Argentina because they're enormous. Yeah, but if you're Honduras or Nicaragua, then coming to dominate an economy with a very small population, it's just not really going to do anything. You're not going to get the economies of scale necessary to be able to compete on world markets. So obviously the idea is you would then follow it up with market-based reforms. You then, once you've established a strong industrial base, then you can liberalise and so on and so forth. But the difficulties were that when you think about some of the issues, it's kind of state control and subsidies. What it led to, in case of a lot of Latin American countries, it led to a big increase in national debt, and that kind of had crowding out effects. Yeah, so eventually what it does is it damages growth. Even Brazil eventually kind of ran out of domestic market, to sell to. And again, therefore, growth started to fall, and that was compounded by the fact that protectionism, what it's going to do is it's going to allow inefficient firms to survive. So it's going to allow inefficiency, and obviously that's also linked to nationalised sectors. Yeah, also because they face no competitive pressure, they're going to be inefficient, and what that's going to mean is that growth is eventually going to slow down. Yeah, because you're just not making maximum and efficient use of the resources that you've got. And so, although Brazil grew very rapidly between the 40s and the 70s, in the 80s they had this lost decade, where they should have probably liberalised earlier and they didn't. And part of the reason for that was that it was kind of lack of transparency in government. The industries that were protected obviously wanted that to continue and tried to persuade the government that this should remain in place. So whether you could do it today is unclear in a kind of globalised, interconnected world. But the idea is pretty simple, which is that you take areas that you have a comparative advantage in. So if you've got iron ore, you've got coal, then it makes sense to develop a steel industry. From that steel industry, you then develop a car industry. You build these vertical linkages. But to do that, you've got to protect yourself. To do it, you've got to make sure that you can import cheap technology. And to do that, you need cheap electricity, utilities, infrastructure, and so on. So it's a consistent interventionist policy, although many things went wrong with it as time evolved, and it was more suitable for some economies than for others. Probably worth pointing out, that actually this follows the route that most existing developed countries followed. So Britain and the United States, they both followed highly protectionist policies in the short run. Before eventually kind of going, yes, liberalisation is great. But whether a country at this stage could pursue that policy, probably in terms of global power balance, they probably couldn't.